What's up, everyone? You're listening to the Digitize Fully Charged Podcast. I'm your host, Pam Curry. I'm joined, as always, by my colleague, Niall Ridgway. And today's conversation is with Mr. AI Educator, Dan Fitzpatrick. We're super excited to have Dan join us today. He's a busy chap. He's been traveling all over the world talking about AI. And this one is a bit of a departure from our usual podcast format, where we just have a flowing conversation with Dan really about AI, about the future of education, about what education might look like if we were to get a bunch of people in a room and rethink it. Let's dive in. Dan, lovely to see you today. Thank you so much for joining us. I would attempt to give an introduction to you. I think probably the best thing is for you to just tell us a bit about who you are, what your story is. And I mean, as far as we know, you are literally Mr. AI in education right now. Seems to me like you've been everywhere for the last 12 months. Yeah, tell us about yourself.
So my name is Dan. I am from the northeast of England, as you might be able to tell from my accent. So I'm from Newcastle. I trained as a high school teacher, so I was a secondary school teacher, trained in Manchester in England, and then moved back up home to Newcastle. Always kind of been interested in digital technologies, even my life before as a teacher. I remember doing an MA like probably 15 years ago now, and my professor talking about this book called The Feed, and I remember going away and reading it. It was all about kind of this dystopian future where when babies were born, like a computer chip was put in their head, and that's how they interacted with the world, and it was almost caused like an augmented reality within their heads. And I remember just being fascinated by this concept. Really interesting how 15 years later, and we've got technology like Neuralink being developed and so on. So kind of the AI concept and everything I was really, really fascinated in, and educational technology, I guess, like yourselves as well. So when that was my main priority really throughout all of my career in the classroom, was to how can we utilize technology to help enhance learning, and I really believed that it could. So that was kind of my starting point really, and worked with a few great people to kind of get things off the ground in the schools I was in. Started a podcast on the side, so started a podcast called EduFuturists, which is still going. I'm not part of it anymore, but Ben and Steve are still going forward with that and doing amazing work with it. And I suppose anything like, I don't know how you guys feel, but when you start going down the route of educational technology, it doesn't take you long before you start exploring kind of the future of education as well.
Because
what education might look like in a few years' time, and how do we drive that change? So, kind of quickly went from ed tech to the future of education, and we kind of saw it as, well, I saw it as every Thursday night it was my opportunity to speak to somebody from around the world who was actually doing something different.
Yes,
and I think we were both kind of in this English education system, which is very traditional. It's very very inward looking, and I don't think many people around us could really envision, and I think it was really difficult for myself as well to envision that there could be other ways of doing it, better ways of doing it. So it was a great opportunity, and I'm sure you guys will know as well, like once you start a podcast, it's kind of a write your own check to speak to whoever you want to speak to around the world.
I mean, we're having this conversation right now. Like, I kind of pictured just dropping you a wee message prior to starting up the podcast. So you're right. It's a chance for us to chat and catch up and meet lots of amazing people.
And it is. It's great, and it's this now, like being on the other side of it. Just to spend like an hour or so just delving into a topic and really in a deep way. Like I can't talk like this with my fiance Julia, because she would leave me, I think, if I just had these conversations every day with her. A lot of my work is on a stage talking at people, in a certain respect. So to be afforded these opportunities for kind of a deep dive hour is really beneficial, and I think it's it's really needed, I think, to try just to think. I think sometimes just being given the space, and whoever's listening to this as well, to just be given the space to switch off from other things for a bit of time and think about what's possible, how we might be involved with that, and so on. So so that's kind of how it started, and then went through leadership in secondary school, and then moved into further education. Worked on digital strategy and innovation for a large group of colleges in the northeast of England, and it was there really that I started coming across AI again, kind of pre-chat GPT, looking at early language models,
right?
What the future could be around these. Started experimenting with some of them, and then ChatGPT hit, and kind of the world started changing fast. And I kind of just saw myself as, I just wanted to spread some good news about this. I think back in late November 2022, I remember playing around with it, going on the social media. I think like X or Twitter as it was like kind of my main platform then.
Yeah.
Just not seeing really anyone in education talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I just started to. I think I was at my mum's house, and I just pressed screen record on my iPhone, and just went onto there wasn't an app then, just went onto my browser on my phone and did something basic, recorded it, stuck it on Twitter, and then kind of things went from there really.
Do you still remember having that first like conversation with like ChatGPT? It would have been, wouldn't it? I mean, it was for all of us, and being like, this is way better than I imagined it would be. Like this is incredible.
Yeah, I think I still remember the first question I asked, which was, what does the future of education look like?
Kind of big question.
And then I remember just showing it. I think it was at my mum's house, and I remember just showing it to my family and going, "Have you seen this? Have you seen what this can do?" And then playing around with it for a while, and it's weird. It's really fast. I don't know how you find it as well. It's really strange how fast we just take things as normal. So like, I think I remember that first video I posted online was something really, like, looking back, so basic, like write a lesson plan, but it was mind blowing. Like this time 2 years ago, it was absolutely mind blowing. Now you show someone that example and they would just groan and be like, "Yeah, come on, we know that."
Done that now.
It's amazing how fast things do move, and we like, a new bit of technology blows our mind one day, and then the next day we're like, "Okay, what's next?"
It's quite fascinating though. Like, I don't know about your experience, but we've found kind of not resistance always, but maybe a lack of enthusiasm for what it is we're trying to show people. And, it's probably because you go into a school at the end of a day and everyone's kind of tired from having taught children all day. And, you don't always get that reception. But for me, with AI, there's something about it that just seems to give people those wow moments.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because I think I know what you mean about edtech. But I think there's a wider issue, and I think it's down to the systems that we kind of work and play in, really. And that if you've got let's say a group of lecturers or teachers who are doing the job, they're doing all right. They're getting decent grades every year. They're good, rounded teachers doing the job. You come along and go, look at this thing, and it's going to help you do your job. Then I think subliminally, it's subconsciously, it's like, well, I'm already doing my job. Like, and it's like taking up most of my time. So actually, just something else that's going to help me do my job when I'm already doing my job doesn't necessarily make sense.
Yes.
And I think I've been doing a lot for my new book. I've been looking at a lot at the business world and how the business world moves fast.
Yes.
And why education doesn't seem to. And I think it comes down to competition. Like, if business has to move fast because there's going to be somebody else who comes and does it better than them. Continuously. And then you partner that with a brand new technology and someone else who wants to take that technology and do better than them, then they've got no choice but to evolve or die, really.
Sure.
The education system's never really been in that position. And therefore, there's no real incentive to to innovate in a meaningful way.
Mm-hmm.
So I personally, I make the argument in my new book as well. I think that we can't keep education safe from that anymore. I think we're entering a time now where we're going to get viable competition to education that's very different to what we've seen, and we're starting to see that. I mean, the fastest growing school in the UK at the minute is an online school.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just the start of what type of different offerings we're going to see from AI that can help people learn.
And maybe like, because we're talking about like systemic change here, aren't we? Like, we're talking about like a seismic shift. It's not going to happen unless the products lead the way, is it? Like, it's like that kind of, that change isn't probably going to come from governments. Although Greece, I was listening to your Spotify podcast. Like your AI, what's it called? AI
in Education Daily.
AI in Education Daily.
That's right.
Yep.
And you were talking about the government in Greece, like really embracing AI. Tell us what's happening in Greece then. Tell us about what's going on there a wee bit more, because, you know, people wouldn't have heard that.
Yeah, well, like, to be honest, it's not that revolutionary.
Okay.
All they're doing is going, right, here's some tools we've created. It's very similar. I mean, if we were to reel off a few AI tools that teachers are already using around the world, the tools that these guys have created aren't anything particularly different.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at kind of like toolbox style apps that'll do certain things using ChatGPT for teachers. And I think they've got a student version as well that they've created. And they've done it in partnership with the European Union as well, as like an overall wider project. But essentially, they've just gone, right, here's two tools we've developed, or the EU's helped us develop, and we're going to integrate them into our schools. Essentially, that's. In fact, I was just preparing my my podcast for tomorrow just before I joined you, and I was reading a story about the Philadelphia school system over in America and how they're just about to do something similar around like a fully integrated CPD system that will bring all of their teachers up to a certain level of knowledge and skills around AI. It's not too difficult to do this type of thing. It's interesting because I've always been at kind of the grassroots. I've always, ever since I was trained to be a teacher, and myself and a guy called Ben Whittaker, we were doing breakfast and breakfast mornings to try and get teachers to explore EdTech tools. We were trying to integrate Google tools at the time, and ever since those days, I've always kind of been like a grassroots. Even when I was on senior leadership teams, I always still kind of felt a bit out of place because I was kind of like so used to fighting upwards, rather than downwards. But I really think that in order for meaningful change to happen, it will have to come from the top down.
Sure.
I think I'm sure you guys have as well, been at the grassroots fighting up for such a long time.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I don't think, unless we've got a top-down approach as well, I don't think we're going to get any sustainable change. So, and actually I write the very last chapter, or the second to last chapter of my new book, is all about kind of, it picks up on a theory called panarchy, which is it's from a like design thinking school called Liberating Structures, and it talks about how ecosystems within a school have to come from below and above. So I'm excited. Actually, in the new year, in fact, I haven't told anybody this yet, but in the new year, I'm pulling together some government officials, some bigwigs from the UK to a meeting, and we're going to sit down and talk about how do we do the top down approach as well. So
Fantastic.
Quite excited about that, because I think we do need that double ended approach.
Yeah,
I think there's something about education that feels safe when it's like, I think a lot of schools we speak to feel safe when we're following kind of government guidelines, and
Yes.
there's a little bit of a message coming out of Scotland just now that actually you need to make the change yourself. Like I'm seeing a bit of that coming from Scottish government organisations where they're like, you can't wait for the system to change. You have to be brave and take that leap yourself. But I think you're right. I think the change in education, because it's so embedded in who we are, and we're dealing with children and young people in their lives. At the end of the day, there's a big responsibility there, isn't there? And I think
you guys in Scotland as well have had, like, I do quite a bit of work. I just keynoted at the Scottish Leaders, the SLS conference.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
A few weeks ago, and I find, so in England, 99% of my work comes from independent schools.
Yeah.
And not much, unless they're getting together collaboratively into a bigger group, not much from like the state sector of school. Whereas Scotland, there's a lot of state schools that I work with around Edinburgh and Glasgow areas.
Yep.
And I really see that and I don't know if it's because you guys have kind of in the past been a bit more innovative. You changed your curriculum. You haven't been afraid to go, right, let's try something new. And I think you guys are doing that at the minute as well, aren't you? Like you've recognized the curriculum might not be fully working, and now you're going to try something else. And
readjust.
So I think it's just kind of what you guys do up there is you try things out.
I like as well that you're working with the government officials, because they could quite easily just say no, and then you get a blanket.
They still might.
Yes. And so I think it is a great thing that you're promoting that and educating people and being like, look at how amazing this could be in the future. We just have to get that word out there and support our teachers and therefore support our students to use these tools effectively.
And I think it would be amazing to go, right, let's say 5-10 years time, we know AI is going to be ubiquitous. It's going to be around us. It's going to be what we do. I think I reported yesterday that, like we mentioned Neuralink right at the start, that they've got scale to grow, to keep doing this stuff. We're going to have augmented humans. We're going to have chances are we're going to be living with humanoid robots. This sounds crazy to anyone who hasn't jumped into this topic. Well, this stuff is happening. It's advancing at a very fast rate. If let's say an education system didn't exist, and we were to get in a room and go, what kind of education system do we need to build?
Yes, I love this thought. I love this question. We go into this a lot. Like, what would it look like? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and I can't imagine it would look all that much like what we've got now.
No. There's no way they'd be like, let's build little buildings in every village and fill them full of rooms and adults. No,
exactly.
It's not gonna happen.
And you'd want, and this is not about getting students integrated with tech more and more. I think it's almost the opposite. It's going, right, well, if our world is going to be so ubiquitous with advanced technologies, how do we provide a space where they are experiencing, I don't know, like in a non-tech space, though. More contact with humans. It's interesting. Some people say to me, especially when I talk about online schools, and I don't think they're the utopia. I don't think they're completely the answer, but they're just another type of school. But I noticed that one of the questions that always comes up is, but what about socialization? Like, we're going to miss out on that. I'm like most schools I go into, well, in the UK anyway, all the kids are sat in lines facing the front. Like, that's not a social situation.
Sure.
And they're like that most of the day, with like a 15-minute break and then a 20-minute break, because I don't know about you, but when I went to school, lunch was an hour. I go into most secondary schools now and it's like 20 minutes. So it's like, there's not much socialization going on anyway. And if it is happening, it's almost happening in spite of the scenario that's going on. So I think we could probably do something better. We could probably, and I think just getting back to the principles. And I was on another podcast recently, and they asked me, if you were in charge of the education department for one day, what would you do with that day? They put me on the spot, but I think it would be to go, right, let's just get everyone in a room and go, what are we doing here? What's the purpose of this?
Yeah.
Because we haven't even agreed on that. And if we haven't even agreed on the purpose of what we're doing, then how on earth are we supposed to do anything else? So I think I think, yeah, so that I'm trying to group some people together to go, some forward thinkers, some government officials, and everyone in between to go, what are we doing, and how might we do this? So it's not even about AI. It's more like, what does education look like in an AI?
Yeah. How do we prepare young people for life and work in an AI driven world? And
Absolutely.
it fascinates me. Like, I feel like there's just there's so much opportunity in this to just rethink the way it's done. And yes, online schools will be thriving because some young people will prefer that way to learn key concepts and whatever else. But imagine if we could just free up all the money that's rooted into the model we've got just now with 30 young people and an educator, because what needs could we meet for the really vulnerable, or the ASD learners, the learners that require more support. Think about what we could do with that human resource if we just diverted it away from the current model. It blows my mind. It's going to take some innovative head teacher somewhere to just rethink the model, rethink the school day, rethink the spaces, and just be bold.
To be fair, that is happening in some circumstances. You look at XP schools, the school group that started in Doncaster. Now they've just opened a school near me, where they don't teach subjects. Now they teach collaborative projects. They get good Ofsted ratings. They get good grades as well. They still work within the English system. So so it is happening, but it just seems to be kind of like outliers. And I think again it comes down to, well, what do we measure? Because just like there's no incentive for a teacher to start using EdTech in their classroom, really, unless you've got a school that's really, really pushing it and saying it's part of your performance appraisal and all that thing. A school doesn't have to do anything different, even though other schools might be doing something different, because as long as they get those good grades every year, as long as they get that Ofsted rating, whatever it might be, then that's all that really matters. And actually, there are amazing ways to streamline that, and we see that there are schools out there who are going, right, this is what we need to do, and this is we're gonna make that more efficient. So you get schools like Michaela School in London, and I talk about this. I've visited them. I went to visit Michaela and other schools who I think have. And I don't think I'm being unfair here, but I think, from what I saw, what they've done is they've looked at the current system. They've looked at what they need to do, good grades, Ofsted, all of that, and went, right, well, how do we optimize it so that we get that end point really, really well? And I kind of liken it. It's a bit cliche, but it's like that, raw materials into a factory, go along the conveyor belt, come out at the end at whatever product they need to be. Now, I remember looking this up. As somebody who is a production line engineer or consultant, so someone who is freelance, goes in, gets company says, come in, have a look at our production line, and recommend some places for efficiency and so on. They can get paid hundreds of thousands of pounds just for one job. Because you think about it, that they could be saving the company millions of pounds. Just by saving a second somewhere. Or
I think what's quite an interesting thought as well is the idea of work. And we're not if we were talking about young people entering the workforce or enterprise sooner, we're not talking about chimney sweeps anymore. We're talking they would be possibly in remote workplaces, in remote teams, collaborating online. I do wonder, we've all been in secondary schools and seen the kind of disengaged young person who goes away home and runs their online business, and it's that disconnect between what young people are doing at home in terms of enterprise and
Yeah.
The way they work, and then the disconnect between what they do in school. That really interests me as well.
And it is interesting that I know a lot of businesses who suddenly thought we can't ask workers to come into the office just to sit on a computer. Like, it doesn't make sense anymore, especially when they've been doing it from home pretty well for a while. So we have to look at, well, what are we doing inside of the building that means that it's worth coming to?
Yes, it's meaningful.
Yes. And I completely understand, like, some people might be listening to this thing, well, you can't do that with 11-year-old kids, 12-year-old kids, go right, do work from, like, we did that and it didn't particularly work well. In fact, when I'm working with schools, I have a pair of, the Ray-Ban Meta sunglasses.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a pair of Ray-Ban glasses.
Got the camera on them.
Yeah, and it has AI, and you can have a conversation with it, and you can tell it to look at things and explain things to you.
Yeah.
And I talk about how, well, actually in the next few years, these will be a lot more advanced. In fact, the technology in them now, if you compared to like the ChatGPT app, it feels almost primitive.
Yeah.
So once the technology that you get, like, let's say just right now in the ChatGPT app comes to those glasses, they're going to be a very interesting bit of technology. And I think we're not going to, it's not going to take long before a parent's trying to get their kid out of bed to go to school in the morning, and their kid just goes, well, why do I need to go? I've got these. Like, I just ask it to teach me things, and it shows me what to do. It teaches me skills. It tests me. There's an app on there that's trained in retrieval practice, and so it helps me embed the learning. And so I think in that scenario, we've got to, as a school or as a college or as a university, go, well, what are we offering that's different to just imparting knowledge and testing that knowledge?
Yeah.
That's a difficult question, because 99% of schooling at the minute is imparting knowledge and testing that knowledge. So,
and there's an argument with AI that knowledge will have a worth of zero. Like, essentially, it makes knowledge, like,
we're all just accessing a central point.
Worthless.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, and I can feel all the learning psychologists screaming at us right now.
Yeah, I know.
And I get it. Like, you do, in order to build skills, you need to work with knowledge. And I don't think any of us are saying knowledge is not important, but I completely understand what you're saying in that. And it's quite similar to what we've got today. If I need to know something, I'm straight on YouTube and I'm watching a video.
Yep.
I think I like to use the term just-in-time learning.
Yes.
Because we've got a system that deals with just-in-case learning at the moment. And
that's a really good way to put it.
Everyone in the room for 14 years, and we're just going to give them so much knowledge just in case they might need to use it sometime in their life. And how much do you actually again, another big cliche, but they're cliches for a reason, because they actually ring true with a lot of people.
Exactly.
In that, how much do we actually remember? Like, we literally take the piss, don't we, like, about Oxbow Lakes and stuff like that, because we're like, because it's literally the only thing we remember from school.
1832 Reform Act. I'll never forget it.
Mitochondria's the powerhouse of the cell. Yep.
and I bet if someone said to you, right, here's a bit of paper, or here's a pad of paper, spend a day and try and write down everything you remember from 14 years of school.
Yep.
You'd probably do a good job, but it wouldn't be 14 years worth. It probably wouldn't even be a week's worth. I think we need to go, right, well, what's knowledge important for? And again, it gets back to the why, doesn't it? Of, well, why are we doing this? Well, we're doing this. Again, it's multiple approaches. And I think I used to be a philosophy teacher, so I'm still very much a fan of knowledge for the sake of knowledge, or education for the sake of education. Is still really important.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it needs to also be knowledge to lead to something. And to be honest, philosophical knowledge has to lead to something as well. It has to lead to, well, the skill to be able to self-reflect on it, to critically analyze it, to test it out in the world. And so I think we need to think, and this is not a job thing. So again, if someone's out there thinking education is not about work, I mean, a lot of it is, to be fair, and it should be. But also it's about how to live a happy life.
Yes.
How to be successful in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. How are we preparing? And I think just front-loading work at the most energetic time of your life and making people sit down in rows for 5 hours a day, I don't think I think, again, we go back to that room where we go, how do we create an education system? I just can't. language, and that's how we'd come up with it. And I think it lacks imagination. It lacks
Totally.
any understanding of what kids need at that moment in life.
Yep.
And it lacks, I think, an understanding of how we use knowledge. That it's literally like ever since we were a baby, we learn to do something because we want to get something, or we want to.
Yes.
A baby will literally get up and start walking because it feels the need to get from one side of the room to another. It doesn't do it for the love of knowing how to walk.
Yes.
And then once it knows that, sits back down and goes, right, well, I know that now. It's a nice thought to have. It's all to lead to something.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying, I'm not saying let's dismantle schools and then just put people out into the world, kids out into the world, and then they can learn it as they need to know it. But it's about going, right, well, how do we create that environment within? Because I'm a big believer, let me sidetrack for a second, that innovation, we have to innovate in two different ways. So we have to innovate in a linear way and a non-linear way. And what I mean by that is we have to innovate inside the system we already have. Because we can't just go, right, shut it down. Because what do we do tomorrow? Like but we can slowly innovate inside, and that tends to be linear innovation because it's still the same goals, it's still the same metrics we're measuring. And to be fair, that's what we've done with AI mainly, haven't we? We've gone, how do we use that to make this more efficient? That's kind of what we've done. And it's the natural first step of innovation. But if we want to create the future, if we want to make sure we stay relevant, we have to do non-linear innovation at the same time. And we have to go, well, if something does happen to our current system and it becomes irrelevant or it's disrupted in some way, what can we move to? How can we make it more relevant? And I think good leadership's about doing both of those at the same time.
Yeah, sure.
So I think what I'm saying here is not just demolish what we've got. It's going, well, how do we please get a group together? And in fact, the second part of my new book is all about getting a group together to look at the non-linear and start working on that now. But also go, right, well, how do we start bringing elements of that type of what we want into what we've already got? So, for example, giving kids work that actually means something. I mean, and people have been saying this for years, haven't they? And we kind of do tokenistic ways normally.
Like mini projects and whatever else. Yeah.
It's kind of like it's left to a drop-down day or some kind of funky day within the school timetable that happens
Absolutely.
Every time. And even just doing that shows the kids it's not integral to what they need to do. It's just almost like almost like a different day that happens every now and then. But I think making I remember hearing, I used to when I was in leadership of secondary schools, technology was kind of my main responsibility, but also careers. And I used to love how I got to play with both of those because I thought they were very well integrated. But I remember hearing a story of a school that got like a local business person in, someone from their area, who was really having trouble with their business. Presented it to them. And the kids for a term worked on it. And then at the end of the term, they went to the business and they presented to the business like what their solution would be. And it's like, that means something.
Yes.
That's where I was going earlier when I mentioned the kind of like, we're not talking about sweeping chimneys anymore, because I've seen bits of projects like that as well, where you get young people in a room, give them a real world problem, like give them a real world business problem. Some of the solutions are just incredible, and you think like, I know it's about my nieces, like they're only 12 and 14, but actually they're very capable. You know, like they could contribute to a workforce in a really creative and innovative way.
There's loads of studies that say, like, actually, if you expect something from kids, rather than just knowing or thinking you know what they can handle, actually they step up to the plate more than not and actually deliver. And I think, and again, there's places out there doing this. Like I mentioned XP before. XP, what they will do. In fact, one of the projects I remember learning about was about around refugees in their area. So there was a refugee centre in their area struggling. So they literally will form, like, let's say, a project around it, and they'll go, right, well, first of all, we probably need to know about the history of what's going on here, a history
Yes.
of
The
how people.
countries and the
Yeah,
politics in the countries and how they arrived here. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
There's geography involved. There's history involved. There's
Yeah.
a lot. So they build that knowledge, and they're quite open. Yeah,
Languages.
exactly. Yeah. Problem solving and entrepreneurship, if they're going to actually bring something to life in terms of a solution. And I think they ended up doing some kind of project where they decided the best thing they could do in their remit at that time was to donate bikes to them so they could get around easier, and that was what they came up with. So their projects have a real world impact. And if you go on their Amazon, they sell like kids books and things, so that, and compilations of kids work, because they want everything they do to have like some kind of real world relevance that can be accessed by anybody. So it's not new, it's just, how do we take this type of thing and go, right, how does it become how does it become part of the system? And actually, even as I'm saying this, I'm like, that's why I love being on podcasts, because I get to just think.
You get to think aloud.
Yep.
Yeah. But it doesn't need to be a system. In fact, one of the chapters in my new book is about decentralized education, and about how we're seeing it a lot around the world, like a phenomena of decentralizing systems. We're seeing it in finance. Bitcoin is up to, I checked it this morning, is up to $106,000 per Bitcoin. Like, this stuff isn't going away. And we're starting. It was probably a couple of years ago now, talking to someone who works in health, and how health are really pushing for more decentralized systems to get people away from hospitals and away from a centralized area and so on. And we're really seeing this as a real phenomenon. And I think we're probably seeing it in education to a certain degree as well, with kind of a guy going, I'm going to set up an online school, and being one of the growing online schools in the country within a couple of years, to someone going, you know what, I'm gonna homeschool, and my kids are gonna do 2 days a week at this online American school, and I'm gonna take them to an outdoor center on Wednesdays.
Yes.
And we're starting to see kind of power slowly at the minute in education, but I think it'll grow away from the central system and more to the individual. Now, there's a huge problem with that, which I want to recognize, and that is childcare. I think that's the huge problem. If we want to be really honest about it, especially for those lower ages, education's probably more valuable as a childcare system than an educational system. So that's a big problem. But I think what we will see is choice.
Yeah, and I suppose, like, if we're saving, like, I suppose, like, when you think about the education budget, it's an incredible amount of money. There's opportunities to save money in one pocket, like in secondary schools, and channel that money into increased funding for the younger ones and primary. Because I think the value of young people being somewhere and getting that kind of nurture and. That's like incredibly valuable, but maybe in the secondary years there is an opportunity for that kind of community focused projects, and maybe involve the adults and the parents in those projects. I think we see people paying like lip service to that up here, where they're like, we need to involve parents more. Parental involvement is really important. But then they try and involve parents in, like, teaching maths, and you're like, well, yeah, that's great, but actually you'd get more parental involvement if you were on a joint project to the benefit of your community, and it's you feel like those kind of things would tick a lot of the boxes that we're trying to tick, tacking it onto our current analog system. It's interesting.
We are starting to see parents kind of come up with solutions, like taking it into their own hands. And I was talking to someone who, they were looking at a model where they, how you get like these kind of workspaces where people who have their own business or work from home, rent like a desk at a local workspace. Well, they were looking at, how do we get a bunch of families together that all kind of work from home or have a business, rent one of these. So let's say you have 20 workers in a space, and then within that space you have a room or a few rooms where all their kids go throughout the day, and then they all pay into a pot to pay a teacher who
Mhm.
will be with them throughout the day, who will be a bit innovative, who will not just they're not going to be an expert at everything, so they will do some online stuff with them, like assist them in that, but then also do, and almost just creating their own microcosm of, well, we're going to go to work and work in these offices, and then our kids can come with us and they can learn, they can be part of a school culture,
Mhm.
society, a community there, and then they all have lunch together at a certain time of day with the kids and the families.
There's something lovely about that.
Yeah, there's something really nice, isn't it? And I like that there's people out there going, you know what? Maybe we can just do it better ourselves. Let's get some people together and see. And I love that idea of that it's that decentralization in practice of, and it's not going to work for everyone. And like, you'd have to have a business and have enough money coming in to be able to support that. So
To fund that, yeah.
And again, I can hear people saying, "Well, this is very nice for people who've got money, isn't it?"
Yeah.
And it completely it is. But I think that is why the actual system needs to do something, because I do see in that there being kind of a split off between those who have and those who don't have. And we've seen that split in independent education for hundreds of years,
Forever.
but it's always been kind of that top whatever percentage, that kind of more elite. And I see kind of some of these options becoming a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
In fact, there's an online school I was looking at the other day, which was like a fraction of the price of independent schooling. And I think as it does become a lot cheaper, then kind of your average working person might have options there as well, and might have choices that they just couldn't have dreamed of a few years ago. And that does worry me, because I grew up in a council estate in Gateshead, and didn't really grow up with anything. I'm come from a very working class background, and I can see that if I grew up in that type of world, it would have been a very different world to grow up in. I would have been part of that Knots group. And
is it Norway or Sweden? It's one of the Nordic countries that did away with independent schools. The goal was to put the money back into those state places, so parents who had the luxury of having money were applying that to their child's education, and that then affected the students who didn't have access to that money.
Finland don't. I don't think they have them, and
no, it's Finland. Yeah,
their prime minister literally just sends their kids to like the local school.
And they want every school to be excellent. Every school should be of the same standard.
I don't think they've got any way to distinguish between schools. So it's not, you can't even measure them. You can't go, oh, this school's obviously better. They just don't have any way to compare them. So every school is considered a good school. Like
get rid of the league tables.
I'm not entirely sure how they do it, but it's an interesting concept. In fact, there was a BBC documentary a few months ago. I'm not sure if you saw it. Some guy went over and spent a bit of time. I think he was just doing a bit of an evaluation of the system, the education system. I think he might have been a comedian, and he was just going around spending times in classes, and went to Finland. And like, I think one of the kids just got up and walked out the classroom, and he was like, He'd just spent a few weeks in schools in the UK, and he was like, "Oh my goodness, what's going on?" And he's like, "Nobody's fazed by this." Like, and it just turned out the kid had gone to the toilet, and the teacher was like, "He's gone to the toilet. What's wrong?" He's like, "Well, he hasn't asked. Why would he have to ask to go to the toilet? That's just bizarre." And when you imagine like a kid in English or a Scottish school just stands up in the middle of the class and walks out of the classroom, you'd be like calling on call.
Depute to my classroom now.
So you'd mentioned a lot your book that you've got coming out. I want to find out just a little bit more about the book that you've got coming out, and also it's a book about kind of AI and how we can use AI. So how much has AI been used in writing that book and creating that book?
In fact, I've got a acknowledgements page at the back where I literally detail how I've used AI throughout the book.
Right.
Off the top of my head, without having to pull up that. For research, I used a lot of it. I used used AI a lot for research. So tools like Notebook LM, sticking loads of sources and then trying to pull out, asking it questions and pulling out different information I could use. Also used ChatGPT search for a bit of research. Quillbot to write citations for me because I absolutely hate writing citations.
Yes.
Yeah.
A tool called Elicit for looking for research papers, which is an AI tool which looks for research papers. And other tools for ideas.
Yeah.
From little things like if I'm writing a sentence and I'm like, I don't know how to make this sound good or flow into the next sentence.
Yes.
Better. I've used AI for that. That's... I used AI detectors quite a bit.
Yeah.
I noticed like you put a post on LinkedIn or something like yesterday or the day before where you were like, I'm finding myself rewriting what I've actually written because I'm worried that it's going to get picked up on it. And I haven't used an AI. But you're still...
For the book, I did that a lot because I think I'm just... Because my work is in AI and I write books, I think it's... A lot of people, I get the joke a lot from people like, you wrote, obviously.
You get AI to write that, yeah.
And I get that as a joke quite a bit, and I know it's a joke, but the back of my mind like makes me paranoid. Like, cause I'm like, I didn't. Like, I've used it to like help me, like as a collaborator, but I haven't used it to write it. So I every time I write something, I put it through an AI generator just to see if it's flagged as AI because I just have this paranoia.
Yeah.
I think like someone's going to take my book, copy it, put it into an AI generator, and it's going to say, 15%, 30% generated by AI. And they're going to think, well, this guy's just used AI. So I sometimes put it in, and if it identifies something as AI and it's not, then reword it a bit.
I find the whole idea of an AI checker very bizarre. Like, fair enough if it in the beginning was using like Americanized spellings before you could say I want it to be UK spellings or whatever else. Like phraseology, like it picks up on phrases like in addition to, or...
I've spent a lot of time reworking writing to get it past an AI detector, and simply because I don't. It's not because I'm. Just trying to pass something off, but it seems that what I've noticed is, and you'll probably notice this if you've like got AI to generate writing before. I'm sure there's probably some really eloquent way of saying this, but when you get sentences that like kind of set something up and then have a comma, then you get the rest of the sentence.
You get the punchline almost, like a preamble.
And I've noticed if you just kind of reword that so it just actually does a basic from A to B sentence, it'll then go not AI. So there's something about it kind of, I don't know if the people who are making these tools are kind of, in fact, I think I read somewhere this is what they do. They just produce a lot of writing from AI and put it in another AI and go, right, look for the common similarities.
Patterns.
It made me think, everybody talks about how AI is becoming more and more human over time and it's going to be harder to tell. But are we as humans going to become more and more AI in our writing style? And who's going to influence who in that?
Yeah, we've been taught, I mean, again, in schools, we're taught exactly how to write, exactly how to express our ideas, exactly how to form what we need to write. And actually, when you look at, I'm sure English teachers, again, are probably screaming at me right now, but when you look at some of the best novels and books and writing out there, they don't abide by a lot of those rules.
Yeah. I used to teach English, and I used to teach the young people that actually breaking the rules is where you stand out. Like a one-word sentence. A one-word sentence is a brilliant technique when you're writing. Just to go, death, full stop.
Yeah.
It's the same with like books for 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. If you look at what makes a good book and a best-selling book, and those is typically at the moment not the ones that are just like a standard book. It's where the pages are being ripped, or the crocodile is jumping out, or the like the book with no pictures is rethinking how these stories are written and how books are not just the standard like front cover text, back cover. It's how we can change all that up.
Dan, see, before we go, right, should AI content be labelled? Should it have, because we're in this world, it's only been around for a couple of years, where we don't have the policies, we don't have the legal frameworks, we don't they're just not there. Like, what should we be doing about that as a society? Like, should there be I notice a lot of places are like, was this generated with AI? But at the end of the day, it's a checkbox. You can tick it or not.
It's such a tough question because I think it's such a deep grey area.
I know.
Because, I mean, like, in fact, even as you were just asking that question there, the example that popped into my head was, like, actually, if you're somebody who produces music, you've been using AI for decades.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
I do a lot, like I'm sure you guys do as well with this podcast and other things. Like, there's normally a button in there somewhere that says level the music.
Yep.
Like, that's AI that's doing that. So it's like, you're not getting music producers saying, "Oh, I partially used AI to level this track or to amplify or whatever it is." But so I think there's so much grey area there, and I don't, because again, like, just saying how I wrote the book, I did use AI in various aspects. Now, if I just got AI to write the book, like, without me having any intervention, then I think there's probably there's an authenticity issue there, and maybe that should be labeled. Maybe it should be. Certainly, videos that are pretending to be something they're not, like a deep fake, something like that. I think we've got to, and I tend to say this to schools and colleges when I'm working with them. I'm like, as much as it pains me, you've got to draw the line in the sand somewhere, because people need to be clear on what to expect from content or from a procedure or whatever it is. And so if you're going to go, right, well, we've got to draw the line in the sand here, then I think that's okay. It's quite arbitrary, but I think we probably need to do it somewhere. Where that is, I don't know. I think I don't make that decision either.
And it's going to change by tomorrow, the next day as well. That line is going to shift as more and more tools come out, as the AIs become more and more smart.
Yeah, and it'll not be so obvious. Like, actually, we won't be using tools necessarily to go create this for me. It'll just be entwined. It's a bit like, like, I suppose it's a bit like using Grammarly now, where I'm writing a sentence and it pops up and goes, you know what, if you put that word over here, it'll make a lot better sense. And I'm like, yep, thank you. Click that button.
So when's the book out, Dan?
6th of January. So 6th of January, it'll be released on Amazon, and I think it goes out to Waterstones and other bookshops as well.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's called Infinite Education, the 4-step process to lead and change in the era of AI.
Yeah, Infinite Education. You've got the little infinity symbol on the cover. I've seen that as well.
I do, yeah. And it's kind of, again, it's not directly about AI, but it's about going, what kind of world is AI going to create?
Brilliant.
How do we start to rethink things? And the first half of the book is all the why, and the second half of the book is literally a 4-step process of how an innovator in a college or school or a leader can get a group of people together and start doing this. And there's a lot of practical exercises in there, and I wanted to make it as practical and as possible. And it's kind of, when I went into leadership in further education, it's kind of the book I wish I had.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I've used a lot of the things I had to learn organically. Yep. And I kind of wish someone had given me this and went, this is how you influence an executive team. This is how you build a strategy, and this is how you bring people along with you. This is then how you align the organization on your message. So it's like, so the 4 steps are scope, shape, influence, align. That's about how do you build something new and then take everybody with you.
Take people with you, yeah.
Brilliant.
And the AI Educator.io is your website?
That's it, yeah. And if you want to know more about the book, it's infiniteeducation.ai. And there's a wait list on there at the minute because it's not on Amazon just yet. And if you sign up to that, you get a free bonus chapter on the release day.
Nice.
I love that you used Notebook LM at the bottom as well, just to give a wee deep dive into it and have a wee chat.
Yeah, I stuck the whole book in there and got it to create a podcast and just put it on there just to give a bit of a teaser.
Amazing. Love it. Really excited to read that. 6th of January. Dan Fitzpatrick, thank you so much for joining us today. I feel like we could probably talk for another hour at least.
Yep, easily.
So we're going to have to, I mean, things are moving so quickly. We're going to have another chat soon, I think, because,
absolutely.
I'd love to hear all about your travels and, what people are saying in different parts of the world. Wow, I feel like we could have just kept that conversation going as well. Thank you so much, Dan Fitzpatrick, for joining us today. Really excited about the book as well. Remember, we are digitize.com is our web address. You can find out all about our courses, our training, our products that we deliver to businesses and education. We'd really appreciate it if you follow us on wherever you listen to your podcasts. Give us a subscription, please. It really helps us just to get a bit more traction and get some more followers, and we really, really do appreciate every single one of those reviews or likes. If you want to catch up with us on social media, we're at Digitize Crew on most platforms. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks very much for listening.